The sunlight scattered across the coastal highway as Michael and Sarah Thompson drove their blue Chevrolet Impala toward the sleepy seaside town of Pine Harbor, Maine. It was June 15th, 1979, 3 days after their wedding in Boston, Massachusetts. The newlyweds had been college sweethearts at Northeastern University, where Michael studied engineering and Sarah pursued journalism. After 4 years of dating, they finally tied the knot in a modest ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Their honeymoon destination wasn't exotic or expensive, but it held special meaning. Pine Harbor was where Sarah's grandparents had honeymooned 50 years earlier. "Just another 20 minutes, Michael said, glancing at the paper map spread across Sarah's lap. At 26, he had a promising career ahead at a Boston engineering firm. His dark hair was cut in the fashionable style of the time, and wire-rimmed glasses framed his attentive brown eyes. He reached over to squeeze Sarah's hand, his new gold wedding band catching the light. Sarah, 24, with shoulder-length blonde hair and a camera hanging around her neck, smiled back at her husband. "I can't wait to see the lighthouse. Grandma always said it was the most romantic spot on the East Coast." As a freelance photographer with growing recognition in local publications, Sarah had packed 3 cameras for their week-long getaway, determined to capture every moment. The coastal town came into view as they rounded a bend in the road, a picturesque New England settlement with clapboard houses in faded pastels, fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and narrow streets leading to the town center. The Seacliff Hotel stood on a bluff overlooking the Atlantic, a Victorian-era building that had once been the summer home of a shipping magnate before being converted into a hotel in the 1920s. As they pulled into the gravel parking lot, Sarah gazed up at the 3-story structure with its weathered grey shingles, white trim, and wraparound porch. "It's exactly like the photograph at Grandma's house," she whispered. The hotel had seen better days, but it retained a certain charm that newer establishments couldn't replicate. History lived in its walls. "Welcome to the Seacliff," greeted Gerald Mercer, the hotel owner, as they entered the lobby with its dark wood paneling and faded Persian rugs. In his 60s, with thinning grey hair and weathered hands that spoke of years of maintenance work, Mercer had inherited the hotel from his father and had been running it for nearly 30 years. "You must be the Thompsons. We've got you in room 212, best view in the house." "Thank you," Michael replied, signing the guest register. "My wife's grandparents stayed here in the 20s. The Matthews." "Matthews." Mercer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Can't say I recall the name, but that would have been before my time. My father might have known them." He handed them an old brass key attached to a wooden tag. "Breakfast is served from 7 to 9, and dinner's at 6. The lighthouse tour leaves at 10 tomorrow morning if you're interested." As they followed Mercer up the creaking staircase, Sarah noticed the photographs lining the wall, black and white images of the hotel through the decades, groups of guests posed on the front steps, the harbor in various seasons. Her photographer's eye appreciated the historical record, but something else caught her attention too, a stillness about the place, as if the hotel itself was holding its breath. Their room was spacious, if somewhat dated, with floral wallpaper, a 4-poster queen bed, and wide windows overlooking the Atlantic. Sunlight streamed across the hardwood floor, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Sarah immediately went to the windows, pushing them open to let in the salt-scented breeze. "It's perfect," she said, turning to Michael with a smile. "Exactly what I imagined." That evening, they dined in the hotel's restaurant, a room with large windows facing the water and only 5 other tables, most unoccupied. The Thompsons enjoyed a simple but well-prepared meal of local seafood, chatting with their waitress, Linda Baker, a local woman in her 40s who had worked at the Seacliff for over 20 years. "You picked a good time to visit," Linda told them as she refilled their water glasses. "Not too crowded yet. July and August, we can barely keep up." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Though I don't mind telling you, the hotel's seen better days. Mr. Mercer's been talking about selling for years, but he never goes through with it." "It would be a shame to lose all this history," Sarah commented, glancing around at the vintage light fixtures and ornate moldings. Linda nodded. "This place has stories, that's for sure. Been here since 1887. She straightened up as another guest entered the dining room. "Enjoy your dinner, folks." After dinner, Michael and Sarah walked along the cliffside path behind the hotel, watching as the sunset painted the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. The lighthouse stood a mile down the coast, its beam already visible as dusk settled over the water. "I want to take sunrise photos tomorrow," Sarah said, leaning against the wooden railing. "The light will be perfect on the water." Michael wrapped his arm around her waist. "I'll set the alarm, but don't expect me to be coherent. You know, I'm not a morning person." They returned to their room as darkness fell, the old building settling around them with creaks and sighs. Through the open windows came the rhythmic sound of waves breaking against the rocks below. They fell asleep in each other's arms, newlyweds beginning their life together. Sarah woke before dawn, as planned. Careful not to disturb Michael, she dressed quietly, gathered her camera equipment, and slipped out of the room. The hotel corridors were silent and dimly lit. She paused at the top of the stairs, noticing a door she hadn't seen before, partially hidden behind a large potted fern. Curiosity piqued, she approached it, finding it unlocked. Beyond was another, narrower staircase leading upward, the attic, perfect for sunrise shots, she thought. The stairs led to a spacious attic with dormer windows, offering a panoramic view of the coastline. Dust sheets covered old furniture, and trunks were stacked against the walls, the accumulated history of the hotel. Sarah made her way to the east-facing window and set up her tripod just as the first rays of sunlight appeared on the horizon. For nearly an hour, she photographed the changing light on the water, the town gradually coming to life below. As she was packing up her equipment, something caught her eye. A small door, almost like a cupboard, set into the wall beneath the eaves. Again, her curiosity got the better of her. Setting down her camera bag, she crossed the attic and tried the handle. The door opened with a protesting creak, revealing not a cupboard, but another staircase, this one descending steeply into darkness. Sarah hesitated, then reached for her flashlight. The beam illuminated wooden steps disappearing downward. Service stairs, probably. A shortcut back to their floor would save her from disturbing other guests. She began to descend carefully, one hand on the rough stone wall for balance. The stairs went down further than expected, beyond the ground floor into what must be the basement. The air grew cooler, damper. Sarah was about to turn back when she heard a sound, faint but distinct, a mechanical hum coming from below. When Michael woke around 8, he was unsurprised to find Sarah gone. Her sunrise photography expeditions were routine. He showered, dressed, and headed down to the dining room for coffee, expecting to find her already there, reviewing her morning's work. But Sarah wasn't in the dining room. Only 2 other tables were occupied, an elderly couple and a solitary man reading a newspaper. Michael took a seat by the window, ordered coffee from Linda, and waited. By 9, with no sign of Sarah and their lighthouse tour approaching, he began to worry. "Have you seen my wife this morning?" he asked Linda when she refilled his coffee. "Blonde, about this tall, probably carrying camera equipment." Linda shook her head. "Not since last night. Maybe she's out on the cliffs? Photographers love that morning light." Michael nodded, trying to quell his growing unease. "I'll check outside." He searched the cliffside paths, the small garden behind the hotel, even walked halfway to the lighthouse, calling Sarah's name. Returning to their room, he found it exactly as he'd left it. Her nightgown still draped over a chair, her toiletries in the bathroom. Only her camera bag and the clothes she'd been wearing were missing. By noon, with the lighthouse tour missed and still no sign of Sarah, Michael approached Gerald Mercer in the lobby. "Mr. Mercer, I can't find my wife. She went out early to take photographs, but she hasn't returned. I've looked everywhere." Mercer frowned, setting down the ledger he'd been reviewing. "That's concerning. The cliffs can be dangerous if you don't know them well. Let me help you search." Together with 2 hotel employees, they conducted a more thorough search of the hotel grounds and the surrounding area. As afternoon turned to evening with no trace of Sarah, Mercer suggested contacting the local police. "I don't want to alarm you unnecessarily," he told Michael, "but we should cover all bases. People don't just vanish around here." Officer James Calloway arrived within the hour, Pine Harbor's sole full-time police officer, a stocky man in his 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and a thick Maine accent. "When exactly did you last see your wife, Mr. Thompson?" he asked, notebook in hand. "Around 11 last night when we went to bed," Michael answered, his voice tight with worry. "She was planning to take sunrise photos. That's not unusual for her. She's a photographer." Calloway nodded. "And nothing seemed off? No arguments, no mentions of going somewhere specific?" "Nothing. We were having a perfect time." Michael ran a hand through his hair. "This isn't like her at all. Sarah wouldn't just disappear." The initial search expanded. Calloway called in assistance from neighboring towns, organized volunteers to comb the coastline, and interviewed all hotel staff and guests. Sarah's description was circulated to businesses in town and neighboring communities. That night, alone in room 212, Michael barely slept. He kept expecting to hear Sarah's key in the door, her familiar footsteps, her voice explaining some misunderstanding. But the room remained silent except for the distant sound of waves and the occasional creak of the old building. Morning brought no answers, only more questions. No one had seen Sarah since she and Michael returned from their evening walk. Her parents arrived from Connecticut by mid-afternoon, their faces drawn with worry. The search continued, expanding further inland, with volunteer teams scouring the woods and coastal paths. On the third day, Officer Calloway brought in state investigators. They searched the Thompsons' room thoroughly, interviewed Michael multiple times, and examined Sarah's background for any clues. But there were none. Sarah Thompson had simply vanished without a trace. "We're not giving up," Calloway assured Michael and the Matthews family. "People don't just disappear into thin air." But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, it seemed that Sarah had done exactly that. The case remained open, but active leads dwindled. Michael stayed in Pine Harbor for 6 weeks, reluctant to leave the last place he'd seen his wife before returning to Boston, a shell of his former self. For the Matthews family and for Michael, life entered a painful limbo. Without answers, without closure, they existed in a state of perpetual uncertainty. Was Sarah alive somewhere? Had there been an accident, foul play? Every possibility was agonizing to consider. As 1979 gave way to 1980, the case of Sarah Thompson's disappearance became one of Maine's most puzzling mysteries. Periodically, the story would resurface in newspapers, on anniversaries, or when similar cases occurred, but no new information ever emerged. Gerald Mercer found himself fielding questions about the Honeymoon disappearance for years. It affected business initially, but eventually became part of the Sea Cliffs lore, a tragic chapter in the hotel's long history. Michael Thompson never fully recovered from the loss. He remained in Boston, threw himself into his work, but friends noted that a fundamental part of him had disappeared along with Sarah. He never remarried. On the anniversary of her disappearance each year, he would return to Pine Harbor, walk the same paths they had walked together, and leave a bouquet of daisies, Sarah's favorite, at the lighthouse. And then, 35 years later, in the summer of 2014, the truth finally began to emerge. The Sea Cliff Hotel had changed hands several times since 1979. Gerald Mercer had finally sold the property in 1985, unable to maintain the aging building. Subsequent owners had made various renovations and updates, but none had succeeded in making the historic hotel profitable in the long term. In 2014, the property was purchased by Coastal Heritage Resorts, a company specializing in restoring historic properties. Their plan was to completely renovate the Sea Cliff, maintaining its Victorian character while adding modern amenities. Ryan Delaney, the project manager, arrived in Pine Harbor in May to oversee the initial assessment. "The structure is basically sound," the building inspector told Delaney as they toured the property. "But there are some moisture issues in the basement that need addressing before any renovation can begin." The basement of the sea cliff was a labyrinthine space, divided into smaller rooms that had served various purposes over the decades: storage, laundry, maintenance. As the inspection team mapped the area, they made a puzzling discovery. According to their measurements, there appeared to be a space unaccounted for, a room that didn't seem to have an entrance. "It doesn't make sense," Delaney said, reviewing the blueprint spread across a table in what had once been the hotel lobby. "There's clearly square footage here that we can't access." "Old buildings like this often have sealed spaces," the architect suggested. "Could have been closed off during a previous renovation." "We need to find out what's there before we proceed," Delaney insisted. "If there's water damage, it could compromise the entire structure." The team began a careful examination of the basement walls, looking for any sign of a sealed doorway. It was a demolition worker who found it, a section of wall that sounded different when tapped, covered by decades of paint and plaster. "There's definitely something behind here," he called to Delaney. With careful work, they exposed what had once been a doorway, sealed with bricks and mortar. The work was old, but not original to the building. The materials and techniques suggested it had been done sometime in the mid to late 20th century. "Let's open it up," Delaney directed, both curious and apprehensive about what they might find. Historic buildings often held surprises, not all of them pleasant. It took several hours to safely remove the bricks. As the opening grew larger, flashlights revealed a room beyond, a space untouched for decades. The air that escaped was stale, heavy with dust and something else, something that made the workers step back involuntarily. When they finally created an opening large enough to enter, Delaney was the first to step through, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a room approximately 15 feet square. Against the far wall stood shelving units filled with old hotel records and supplies, but it was what lay in the center of the room that caused Delaney to freeze in place. Two human skeletons, side by side, on the concrete floor. The Pine Harbor Police Department, now headed by Chief Rebecca Calloway, daughter of the now-retired officer James Calloway, cordoned off the Sea Cliff Hotel as a crime scene. The Maine State Police and forensic specialists arrived within hours. The discovery of human remains turned the renovation project into a potential homicide investigation. Initial examination suggests the remains have been here for decades, the forensic anthropologist informed Chief Calloway as they stood outside the sealed room. A male and a female, both young adults, based on bone development, no obvious cause of death visible without further analysis. Near the skeletons, investigators found several significant items: a man's wallet containing a driver's license issued to Michael Thompson, a woman's handbag holding identification for Sarah Thompson, and most tellingly, a camera, a Nikon F2 with the initials SMT engraved on the base. "My God," Chief Calloway whispered, recognition dawning. The Honeymoon couple, the missing persons case from 1979. The news spread quickly through Pine Harbor. Many older residents remembered the case, the beautiful young couple who had vanished without a trace, the extensive searches, the theories that had circulated for years afterward. Now, it seemed, the mystery might finally be solved. James Calloway, 79 and long retired, arrived at the police station within hours of hearing the news. "I never stopped wondering about them," he told his daughter, his weathered face solemn. 35 years, and I still remember every detail of that search." "We need to notify next of kin," Rebecca said. "Do we have any contact information for the families?" Her father nodded slowly. "Michael Thompson never left Boston, as far as I know. The case files should have his last known address, Sarah's parents, the Matthews. They may have passed by now." The task of notification fell to Detective Marcus Reed, who traveled to Boston the following day. The address they had for Michael Thompson led to a modest apartment in Cambridge. The man who answered the door was in his early 60s, his hair grey, his face lined with the passage of years. "Michael Thompson?" Detective Reed asked. The man looked confused. "No, I'm Daniel Parker. I've lived here for about 10 years. Further inquiries revealed that Michael Thompson had indeed lived at that address until 2009, when he had died of a heart attack at the age of 56. He had never remarried and had no children. His only living relative was a sister in Chicago, Elizabeth Thompson Walsh. Sarah's parents had both passed away, her father in 1995, her mother in 2001. Her only sibling, a brother named Robert Matthews, was located in Seattle. Detective Reed flew to Chicago to meet with Elizabeth Thompson Walsh in person. At 64, she bore a striking resemblance to her brother, the same thoughtful brown eyes behind glasses, though her hair had remained dark. "I always knew something terrible had happened," Elizabeth said, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted the cup of tea Reed offered. They sat in her sunlit living room, surrounded by family photographs. Michael was so in love with Sarah. He would never have left her willingly. "We're still determining exactly what happened," Reed explained gently. "The medical examiner is working to establish cause of death." Elizabeth nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "At least now we'll know." All these years, not knowing was its own kind of torture. Michael never gave up hope that she might be found alive someday. He kept her photograph by his bed until the day he died. In Seattle, Robert Matthews received the news with stunned silence. At 58, he had been just 19 when his sister disappeared. "I'd almost convinced myself she'd run away," he admitted to the local detective who delivered the news. "Created a new life somewhere. It was easier than thinking she was dead all this time." As the investigation proceeded, forensic analysis revealed more details about the Thompsons' fate. Both skeletons showed evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull. Sarah's camera, when the film was carefully developed by specialists, contained photographs taken on that fateful morning. Sunrise over the Atlantic, the lighthouse in the distance, and most significantly, several shots of the hotel's attic and the hidden staircase she had discovered. The final photograph was a blurry image of what appeared to be a man's face, captured at an odd angle, as if Sarah had triggered the camera as she was falling. Meanwhile, investigators delved into the history of the Seacliff Hotel and its ownership. Gerald Mercer had died in 1998, but his son, Alan Mercer, now in his 70s, still lived in a neighboring town. "I never understood why my father sold the hotel," Alan told Chief Calloway during his interview. "It had been in our family for generations, but after that young woman disappeared, he changed, became anxious, withdrawn. The hotel started losing money, and he just seemed to give up on it." No. Further investigation into the hotel's financial records from the late 1970s revealed serious problems. The Seacliff had been deeply in debt, with multiple liens against the property. Gerald Mercer had taken out several high-interest loans that he was struggling to repay. Linda Baker, the waitress who had served the Thompsons, was still living in Pine Harbor. Now in her 70s, she provided crucial information. Gerald was desperate to sell the hotel back then, she recalled. There was a developer interested in the property, wanted to tear it down and build condominiums. The deal was supposed to close that summer, but then there was some issue with the basement, something structural. A search of county records confirmed her account. A potential sale to Ocean View Developments had fallen through in June 1979, with inspection reports citing concerns about the basement foundation. The picture that emerged was disturbing in its banality. Sarah Thompson, exploring the hotel with her photographer's curiosity, had accidentally discovered a serious structural issue in the basement, one that would have derailed the pending sale of the property. When Gerald Mercer encountered her there, he had panicked. "We believe he struck her, likely not intending to kill her, but to silence her," Chief Calloway explained during a press conference. When Michael Thompson came looking for his wife later that morning, Mercer led him to the basement as well, where he met the same fate. The sealed room had once been accessible through a door that had been carefully concealed during subsequent renovations. Mercer had created a false wall, then deliberately avoided any work in that part of the basement for years afterward. When he finally sold the property in 1985, the new owners had no reason to suspect anything amiss in the seemingly solid wall. For the families of Michael and Sarah Thompson, the truth brought a complicated mixture of grief and relief. After 35 years of uncertainty, they could finally lay their loved ones to rest. A joint funeral was held in Boston, attended by Elizabeth Thompson Walsh, Robert Matthews, and dozens of friends who had never forgotten the young couple. Michael and Sarah were buried side by side, their headstone bearing a simple inscription, "Together in life, in death, and beyond." The Seacliff Hotel renovation proceeded after the investigation concluded, with one significant change to the plans. At the request of the families and with the support of the Pine Harbor community, a memorial garden was created on the grounds, overlooking the ocean. A bronze plaque tells the story of Michael and Sarah Thompson, ensuring that their tragedy would not be forgotten. The renovated hotel reopened in 2016 as the Thompson House, a tribute to the couple whose lives were cut short within its walls. The attic where Sarah took her final photographs was converted into an art gallery, showcasing works by local photographers. In a quiet corner of the gallery hangs a black and white photograph of the lighthouse at sunrise, one of the images recovered from Sarah's camera. Beside it is a simple quote, "Some mysteries are buried in darkness, waiting for the light of truth to find them." For 35 years, Michael and Sarah Thompson lay forgotten in the darkness beneath the Seacliff Hotel. But in the end, the truth found its way to the light, bringing closure to those who had waited so long, and justice, however delayed, for a young couple whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The case of the honeymoon couple who vanished in 1979 is no longer a mystery in Pine Harbor. It's a reminder of how secrets can lie hidden for decades, and how the past is never truly buried, only waiting to be discovered by those willing to look beneath the surface.